Why the hospitals? Why the primary healthcare system? Why do they kill the poets, the academic leaders? Why do they kill the students? Why do they bomb the universities and the museums? Because this has nothing to do with the Hamas-Israeli war. Nothing to do with that. This is back to Bierut 82.
Doctor, let me know when you're ready and we can get going.
I'm ready for you when you are ready for me.
Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3, let's go. Good day and welcome back to Unapologetic. Today we're speaking to Dr. Mads Gilbert. Dr. Mads Gilbert, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Mads Gilbert is a deeply, highly specialized anesthesiologist and emergency medicine specialist. He's been to the Gaza Strip a few times and is a very outspoken critic, an unapologetic critic of Israeli aggression and occupation. Dr. Mads Gilbert, we're going to get into a bunch of things today. It's going to be quite a long discussion. We're going to speak about Gaza, obviously, what's going on there. We're going to speak about your history visiting Gaza, why you became a doctor. But just to sort of start us off, just from your understanding, how critical right now is the medical situation in Gaza?
It is beyond critical. We've been saying critical for at least 4, 5, 6 months. We've been saying disaster. We have been saying a catastrophic disaster as the Israeli occupation forces have sort of grinded the whole healthcare system to an end by attacking, denying supplies, bombing, arresting healthcare people, burning hospitals. It's been a nightmarish avenue to a situation now where there is virtually no hospital service left in Gaza, and the few provisional field hospitals cannot suffice to neither treat the wounded and the war injured or treat the sick people. Because bear in mind that 2.2 million people in that group of humanity, there will be cardiovascular disease, there will be diabetes, there will be cancer, there will be pregnant women, there will be postpartum women, there will be all sorts of medical challenges that we normally handle in a civilized civilian healthcare system. All of this has been destroyed systematically and willfully by the Israeli occupation army and governed by their government with support from the US. That's a long answer, but the conclusion is, the brief version is, it is falling completely apart, and it's all 100% man-made with the intention of eliminating the Palestinian people in Gaza. And this is not new. These attacks on healthcare in Palestine has been going on at least since I started working with the Palestinian healthcare in 1982. So this is a pattern. This is a modus operandi, which the world, read the Western world, the United States, the EU, the UK, the Western powers, the old colonial powers, they have been backpadding Israel on this strategy of demounting and destroying Palestinian healthcare system. So there is absolutely no breaks for them, because they have never been told before, hey, stay clear of the healthcare system that's protected by international law. Up till the 7th of January this year, the WHO, the World Health Organization, reported more than 600 Israeli attacks on Palestinian healthcare in Gaza and in the West Bank since the 7th of October. More than 600 attacks. And that was on the 7th of January. So this is a political strategy. It's a military modus operandi. It's a willful destruction of the safety network. And we do not know what is the excess mortality among sick Palestinians with diabetes and cancer and all these other diseases. We know pretty much how many dying and dead have been taken to the emergency rooms in the hospitals. But the magnitude of the fallout of this destruction of Palestinian healthcare system, we yet don't know, but it's massive. I actually think it's more than 100,000 people who have either been killed, died from complications, or died from diseases untreated and are still caught under the rubble.
Dr. Mads Gilbert, tell me about your first trip to the Palestinian territories in 1982. Before that trip, what were you expecting to see? And also walk me through the journey. I suppose then you were a lot younger, and after seeing what you saw, did you think that this would still be a lot worse 42 years later?
My first trip was to Lebanon because in 1981 and 82, um, what is today the armed resistance in Gaza, Hamas and Jihad, was at that time Fatah and PLO, and it was headed by the freedom fighter Yasser Arafat or Abu Ammar. And the Israelis had the same tactic: we'll kill anyone who dares lift a stone, Kalashnikov, or a rocket in opposition to our occupation and our colonization of Palestine. And their enemy at that time was clearly the armed resistance organized and led through Fatah and PLO, many other groups also. So my first travel was to Bierut in 1981 first, when the Israelis bombed Fakhani, which is a suburb part of Beirut, where the PLO had their offices, and Yasser Arafat had his bunker. They wanted to sort of blow them away and kill them. They didn't succeed. We had a short mission, worked in a local hospital in south of Lebanon, in Al-Bas. But then in 82, when Israel invaded Lebanon and went straight up to West Beirut, encircled Beirut, cut the water, the fuel supply, the electrical supply, the food supply, the medical supplies, in basically just the same as they are doing in Gaza, and bombed it relentlessly through the summer of 1982. Then I came there with a Norwegian Solidarity emergency surgical team, and we were doing a relay. Sort of, we stayed a few weeks at a time, and then we were exchanged with new teams, which is a model that we started at that time, 82, 81, 82, and which has been a successful model. The conditions were extreme. I was, as you said, a young anesthesiologist from Norway, peaceful Norway, regulated, everything is fine. And then coming into this besieged city with almost no water, very little food, and bombing night and day. We were setting up a provisional field hospital in an underground garage in West Beirut in the Near East School of Theology, the Nest School, which allowed us to use the garage for a hospital. And we were a large team of Lebanese, Syrian, Palestinian, Norwegian, and other nationalities, doing our best through night and day to take care of the wounded who came to the hospital, to the makeshift hospital. Find out who we had to take further on to the American University Hospital, AUB, in Beirut, with their clever high-level trauma teams. And I got a lecture in what colonialism and imperialism is. I got a lecture in how devastating and how ruthless and systematic the Israeli war machine operates when it goes in full force. They bombed everything. They bombed ambulances, they bombed schools, they bombed hospitals, they bombed psychiatric hospitals, they bombed the infrastructure, water pipelines, sewage systems, everything. It was a nightmare. But at the same time, it was a fierce resistance from the Palestinian and Lebanese resistance. And that resistance held West Beirut. The Israelis never conquered West Beirut. But there was a deal. There was some sort of a ceasefire and some sort of a deal, which meant to evacuate the whole leadership in Fatah and PLO to Tunis. Later, they killed some of the high-ranking, most important politicians like Abu Shihat. They killed him in his home in Tunis. And they did not get rid of the armed resistance. Then came the Oslo Treaty, and PLO changed tactique and became sort of a, well, there are many ways to describe that. I'm not going to describe that, but it did not turn out well because the Oslo Treaty, now 31 years old, was only a backstabbing in the Palestinian struggle again. Israel has not fulfilled any of their obligations in the Oslo Treaty. They have not withdrawn to the 67 border. They have not dismantled the colonies, also called settlements, or removed the occupiers, also called settlers. You know, settlement and settlers is much nicer than colonies and occupiers. So the Palestinians have lost their faith in international dealing and appointments and treaties. So my 1982 experience was a life-changing experience for me. Number one, because I got to learn in depth the Palestinian story. I had long conversations with their leaders, like Abu Shihad, and I got an insight that was quite chilling, because having grown up in Norway, going to public schools, high school, college, taking medical school in Oslo, I had never heard about the Palestinians and their story. I never heard about the Nakba, any of these. And I was an active student politician. I've always been a socialist, and international solidarity was part of our program to be internationalists. And here comes Palestine along, and I really get an adult education in what colonialism is and what the Israeli occupation project was all about. It was not about a safe home for the Jewish people. It was all about Eretz Israel, the greater Israel, the land of Israel, described by Theodor Herzl back in 58 or something. And this distinction between Judaism and the Jewish people on one side, and Zionism as a political colonial apartheid project on the other side, took some time for me to understand. I'm of course not a racist. I've never been an anti-Semite, never. I grew up with a narrative of the Holocaust as a prime thing in my home. My mother was extremely preoccupied with Holocaust and what we did not do in Europe, that we turned our back to them. And, one of the books I've written, The Night in Gaza, has foreword by a Jew and postscript by a Palestinian. Max Blumenthal and Noam Chomsky have written forewords in my books. I would defend any Jew who was attacked with my life. But I am a fierce opponent to Zionism because it is a brutal, it is a cynical, sadistic colonial project which has the goal of eliminating the Palestinian people, their culture, their institutions, their archives, their history. The epistemicide of the Palestinians is now what we see in Gaza. When they bomb all the universities, they bomb their archives, their archaeological sites. There shall be no trace of Palestinian society, culture, history, because they are going to be wiped out, like they tried in South Africa, and like they did with the native Indians in North America and Canada, and with the Aborigines in Australia, and with the Tamils in Sri Lanka. So this is a long, devastating, horrible story of colonization of the indigenous people, of the killing, of the elimination of the people, and the eradication of their history, because there's not going to be, in 20, 30, 50 years, there's not going to be anything that could remind you that there was a people living there, is, I think, the plan for the Zionists. And that's what we see folding out in Gaza. And you need to understand this greater context of the situation in order to explain why the hospitals, why the primary healthcare system, why do they kill the poets, the academic leaders, why do they kill the students, why do they bomb the universities and the museums? Because this has nothing to do with the Hamas-Israeli war. Nothing to do with that. This is, back to Bierut 82, this is to stop any armed resistance, because that is threatening the goal of the Zionists to occupy and to take the land from the Palestinians, from the river to the sea. As they have in the flag, the two blue lines, Jordan River, Mediterranean, and the Zionist state in between. So to take back the narrative of the Palestinian people and to understand the context of what we're seeing is so important. And for me, Bierut 82 was, a pretty rough class. And then working in Gaza for the last 20, 25 years has been another long-term learning about how systematic and ruthless the Zionist occupation is, and how they are, strangulating Gaza. They have destroyed all private business structures. They have, before this attack, poverty was at 50%. Unemployment among young people was 68%. It's a very young population, average age around 18. So the whole survivability of the Palestinian society in Gaza was already quite diminished, and healthcare was, it was functioning, but it was not fully operative in any way. So this last attack is sort of the last step in Palestinian people, but they will resist. They will not give up, and I don't think Israel. I say like Ilan Pappé says, this is the end of Zionism.
I just want to go back to 82, and when you came back from that, and after seeing what you call the devastating war that Israel acted out on population centers and everything else. Back then, did you think, what is your frame of mind? Did you think the Zionist project would be able to continue in 1982 for another 42 years? Did you think that sort of the impunity that Israel has been able to continue acting with impunity for the last 42 years would also have continued? Did you think that there'd be some, then as a younger doctor whose eyes had just been opened to what you just said was a very clear colonial project, did you think some sort of accountability and peace would come sooner? Or did you, what was your thoughts about the future and where the Israel project and the Palestinian project would go at that point?
Well, I clearly remember that we who were there were extremely active in order to have some sort of punishment, some sort of a legal process, like we had after the situation in Srebrenica and in Rwanda and so on and so forth. We just have to remember that this only takes place with people of color, not with white people. And I think that's an important thing to remember. But we were naive. We thought there would be some sort of a court thing, sort of a ICJ thing, or some international courts that would be set up in order to find out what kind of war crimes were perpetrated and who were the responsible. Now, there was a trial with regards to the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, but that was handled by Israel, by the state of Israel. And for those who remember, it led to putting the responsibility on Sharon, who was the Minister of Defense. So Sharon lost his position as Minister of Defense. Nobody else were really punished. They said it was the phalangists who did the killing, but it was under the surveillance and control of the Israeli army, who saw everything happening into these two big refugee camps. Sharon came back later as prime minister, as we all know. He always called the Palestinians the insects. I was naive in 82. I thought there would be a proper legal process. There was none. But there was a process. It was the Sean McBride Commission, which was more like a tribunal set up by legal experts, military experts in the West, in Europe, who wanted to see some sort of accountability come true. So there was, I don't recall how long it was, maybe it was a week of hearings in Oslo, in the SAS hotel in Oslo, where all of us who had been in Bierut, we were witnesses, and we gave our testimonies to this tribunal, this court, and I don't have the proceedings here, but it's 3 volumes actually, which was printed with clear conclusions that this was war crimes, had no consequences in the international sphere, did not at all attack the Israeli impunity. It was a little bit like the Russell tribunals that has been, the Russell tribunals after Bertrand Russell, where you compose a tribunal of experts and of people of a certain moral standard, I would say. And then they discuss important issues like nuclear weapons. And there was a tribunal after the 2014 attack. But these popular movements have not been able to change the course of the Israeli impunity. So no, I did not believe in 82 that this could go on, or this could be increased with the cruelty and the extent that it has through these years. And I think today I am a much more matured participant in the struggle for Palestine, because I understand that this is much more than just saying to the occupiers, oh, no, you can't do that. No, please don't please don't bomb this children's cancer hospital. Don't you understand that you shouldn't do that? Please don't arrest minors in the West Bank and put them in solitary confinement. Don't you know you shouldn't do that? Please do not deny people water and food. Please don't let pregnant women not have any access to safe delivery conditions. You think you could talk to people in 2024 with a certain rationale, a certain common humanity platform, and say, listen up, this you just don't do. With Israel, no. And we should learn the lesson. The US imperialism, the colonialism of the West. Take Belgium, take Portugal, take Spain, take Germany, how they treated their colonies and the people in the colonies. We should never forget that, because that is the experience and the acceptance that the State of Israel and Zionism is standing on historically. They are just repeating an old story of insane inhumanity, of slaughtering down of the indigenous people, of wiping out culture from east to west when it suits the colonizers. And I think that one reason for the lame accountability that the European government and the US have been sort of addressing Israel with, and the allowance for this impunity over all these years of colonization, is because it fits with the historical remembrance and the historical trails of the European governments and the United States. So I think the new thing now is that they have gone too far. They have exceeded even the tolerance of the Western governments, not because they have any problems with killing Palestinians, but because there is a problem now that Israel's actions in Gaza 2023, 2024 has nulled out all international conventions. Nobody will trust the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, the Declaration of Human Rights, the Declaration of Children's Rights, the Declaration of Women's Rights. They are all paper. And ironically, the one shredding these documents was the Israeli UN ambassador when he shredded actually the UN Charter, when the UN General Assembly voted massively to acknowledge Palestinian as a state. So you need to sort of take a bird eye view on what goes on in Gaza and understand it in the context of colonialism. And we need to decolonize our analysis of what's going on in Gaza, and not just talk about the discussion of whether or not the hospital had some soldiers, some freedom fighters, some guerrilla fighters, some resistance people. That's beyond the point. The big picture is the important picture, and that is a satanically destructive, sadistic colonialism aiming at the elimination of the Palestinian people, aiming at the epistemicide of the Palestinian people, eradication of their culture, their language, their knowledge, their academics, their literature, everything. And this, if we don't stop this, the question is, who will be next? Because if this kind of treatment of another people is accepted in 2024, who is the next one on the list? Is it Lebanon? Is it Jordan? Is it Syria? Is it Iran? You know, they never get satisfied. They need new markets. They need new raw material. They need more oil and gas. And you know, nobody talks about the oil and gas fields of Gaza. You know, Palestine is a coastal state. They're entitled to 200 miles economic zone, like we have in Norway. We got rich because we found the oil and the gas on our continental shelf belonging to us. Palestine, Gaza, owns the continental shelf 200 miles out. And out there is a lot of unexplored gas and also probably oil. Could massively be explored and produced and could make Gaza to the new Kuwait. And that is something that Israelis are eager and thirsty for, and the US are eager and thirsty for that. That's one important point. The other point is that if the Palestinian resistance succeeds, it is a massive message to the oppressed people of the world. The giant is on clay feet. The giant can stumble. If you organize, if you fight the people's war, if you are stubborn, if you are long-lasting, and if you have the samud of an oppressed people. And I think it was Nelson Mandela who said that no power on earth can stop an oppressed people determined to win their freedom from winning their freedom.
Dr. Metz, you did say that you were kind of naive in 1982, and you wouldn't think this would go on for so long and there'd be some accountability. I think many people who've been seeing the Palestinian-Israeli conflict for a long time probably expected a very, very massive response from Israel after October 7th. On November 7th, which is the month after the attack on October 7th, by then Israel's first month of bombardment was, it's hard to say because every single month of bombardment's been really heavy, but was probably arguably its most intense. On November 7, 10,000 Palestinians had confirmed being killed. Of those, about 4,000 were children and about 2,600 women. At that point, after 1 month, did you think Israel would be able to get away with it for another, what is now 6 months, with no end in sight? Or were you still naive on November 7th?
I am a pretty naive person. I am a pretty optimistic person. And, I travel to Gaza 2-3 times a year to teach my medical students in Al-Azhar University, to do research, to follow up patients, to talk with my friends, to discuss medical research with my good colleagues. Gaza is a home for me. Gaza is my heart, in addition to Norway. And I never thought that Israelis would be allowed to go on for 224 days with the most brutal elimination of a people that we have seen in recorded modern history. I did not think that was possible because I was so naive that I thought that it would click in with the conventions, it would click in with, the Western government saying, we need to stop the export of weapons to Israel, or use the same tools as the Western governments have been using so efficiently or so quickly against Russia. Sanctions, boycott, divestment, weapon embargo, military support, financial support, political support. I thought that there had to be limits to what Israeli fascist government, the current government, with openly bragging fascists as members and ministers, that they would be stopped. And it's a bitter lesson. It's a bitter lesson for all of us who believe in decency and humanity and who are against racism and apartheid. It is a bitter lesson to see today that we have failed. Europe has failed massively, massively. And I'm not talking about Germany or the other EU governments or the Scandinavian governments or UK. I'm talking about all of us, because this is a collective quagmire that we are drained into by our European colonial history. We have not done enough to raise public awareness and to raise political awareness and political power to say To decolonize means, among other things, to stop the Israeli occupation of Palestine. That's part of the more academic maneuver of decolonizing our mind. This must be much more than lip service. And this must be on the shoulder of every one of us. Because what was the teaching, what was our experience from Holocaust? It was that the Nazi Germany, with their racist and anti-Semitic rhetorics, they got away with it. Why? Because people didn't understand? No, because people turned their back to it. Yes, they didn't have Instagram. Yes, they didn't have TikTok. Yes, they didn't see the real reality as it happened, as we do with Gaza and the West Bank. But they knew. The governments knew. They knew about the extinction camps. They knew about the gas chambers. They knew the drawings and the techniques they were using, and they didn't stop it. So we cannot have that repeated. We've all been saying never again about Holocaust, and here it happens again. So I think it is a massive blow to our trust in the government, our trust in UN as a governing energy or body over the colonial powers, and our trust in simple, basic decency, that you don't kill children, you don't kill women and elders, you don't destroy hospitals and mosques and churches, you just don't do that. So it's really, really, really an extremely depressing lesson. On the other side, the optimism lies in the fierce resistance in Gaza and in the West Bank, the armed resistance, not having allowed Israel to win in any way. They're still resisting after 224 days. The Palestinian resistance is able to counter the Israeli military machine in a way that they probably never thought should be possible. That's one thing. The sumud of the Palestinian people in Gaza and in the West Bank, they have not been tempted to fall into the trap of social chaos and complete havoc. Yes, there are problems, of course, when you have millions of hungry people. But by and large, the Palestinian people behave with great dignity. And you see the interviews, great dignity. Great rage against the West, of course, and they are entitled to have that. Look at the kids of Gaza. I know them. I know hundreds of them. And they are so resilient because, the harder you boil them, the harder they get. And Israel has been boiling Gaza for 16 years. And they have, unfortunately, recruited probably one of the strongest anti-colonial resistance movements in modern history, the Palestinian resistance. And they're all shivering in their trousers because they see that the urban warfare that is going on in Gaza is not easily won, and they will not win it. So in many ways, there is hope. And of course, the international solidarity movement has been massive through these days, and the encampment of the students starting at Columbia University and now becoming an international worldwide student intifada is extremely promising. There are universities all over who are divesting now, thanks to the students' brave demands of divesting from research cooperation, from teaching cooperation, from financial supporting institutions in Israel cooperating with the Israeli military. It's not only in the US, Canada, it's in, it's all over. Netherlands, Norway, Ireland, Scotland, UK. It's a massive movement. And don't forget that it was in many ways the students' movement that both brought the apartheid struggle to a new level, brought the Vietnam solidarity movement to a new level through the killings in Kent and the follow-up of that, and also the anti-racial movement in the US. The students, incredibly important. It's the future, the students. So I think this triangle of resistance, the Palestinian resistance proper, which is the most important, the students' movement, which is global, and the global solidarity movement itself, which has really, really mobilized more than we have ever seen. And very promising that young Jews in the US are turning away from Zionism and making alliances with their brothers and sisters from the Arab world and from Palestine. It's going to be a new dawn. It must be a new dawn. If not, we're all lost.
You've just mentioned that you've been working there since 1982 and on and off and in and out of Gaza and other Palestinian territories. Right now, you're not in Gaza. Are you in close coordination with doctors who are in Gaza, health facilities? What are you hearing from them?
Yes, I am in close contact with my old colleagues. I've been working, my first appearance in Gaza's healthcare was during the first Intifada in 1989. And then from around 2006, I've been traveling to Gaza annually to teach, to do research, to follow up patients, and to just be there with the system, with the healthcare system. So in addition to these sort of commitments I had at university level and with research and healthcare development together with the Palestinian healthcare system, I always go there when there is bombing. So I was there during the bombing in 2006, 2008-9, 2012, and 2014. And I produced, together with my team, a number of scientific papers. So I have a network of colleagues in Gaza that I've known for the better part of 22 years. And I communicate with them. The sad thing, the horrible thing is, of course, that some of my closest colleagues have been killed with their families by the Israeli killing machine. Other colleagues that I also communicate with regularly, if not daily, at least regularly, have been captured, taken away from Gaza into the concentration camps in the Negev desert and been heavily tortured. Two of them, close friends, have been tortured to a level that they are shadows of themselves. And one, the brave and famous head of the orthopedic department in Shifa, was tortured to death. So of the one remaining, I keep close contact. I get updates. I get cases. I discuss the situation. And then what people don't know is that we have a large number of supporting networks, in particular in the Arab world, in the medical world, where we are hundreds of medical doctors and other specialists who have organized video-based support systems in order to stand shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues in Gaza in the situation where we cannot travel in because we're denied access, and in a situation where the resources are dramatically insufficient to handle complex cases. So I have multiple information sources from the ground in Gaza. I talk regularly with the Minister of Health, Dr. Youssef Abarish. I talk to the head of the International Cooperation Committee, Dr. Shatat, Mohammed Shatat, Ahmed Shatat, and I talk to others. These are extremely valuable sources of knowledge. And then, of course, I follow the UNRWA's reports that comes 3 times a week. It is called Flash Updates. This one is from yesterday, 17th of May. On day 224, and it sums up the number of killed, the number of wounded in Palestine on the Israeli side, and of course the numbers from Israel has been completely flat since the 7th of October, whereas the numbers from on the Palestinian side have been increasing, as if they were following a mathematical formula. So there is abundant resources who can easily be accessed by all the rulers in the Western world. All the governments have access to this very detailed update 3 times a week. They know everything that has happened. They know of all the attacks. They know detailed, like in this last flash update, they go through who were killed from the 15th to the 17th of May. How many, where they were killed, how they were killed. And listen up, during these 2 days, from the 15th of May to 17th of May yesterday, Israelis killed 70 Palestinians in Gaza, and they wounded 120. And the last 24 hours, that is the 24 hours of the 17th of May, they killed 31 and they wounded 56. So the numbers are staggering. They're so brutal because they come on top of all the other killings. But who's going to take care of these people? Who's going to handle 120 wounded, which for a modern state-of-the-art university hospital in London, in Glasgow, in Oslo, in New York, would be a massive challenge. We call it a mass casualty situation, where the resources in the hospital is insufficient to handle a sudden burst of patients coming in. Typically, we call it disaster medicine. But the Palestinians in Gaza, they have been getting these numbers of injured day by day for 7 months now. In a medical system that Israelis systematically have crushed to the bone, killed the healthcare staff, denied them water, fuel, electricity, medical supplies, drugs, antibiotics, medical instruments, everything. And still they keep producing this sadistic flow of humans who need actually high-level medical support. And to add to the picture, I think it's important to recognize that the only cause of function in Gaza's healthcare now is the bravery of the Palestinian healthcare workers. It's the doctors, the nurses, the pharmacists, the medical students, the nursing students, the paramedics, the ambulance paramedics, not at least, who are still standing tall, who are still not yielding from their patients' sides. The moral compass of the world today is held by the healthcare people of Gaza. They show what it means to be a human.
Doctor, you mentioned the staggering scale of Israel's destruction on the healthcare sector in Gaza, in fact, all over Gaza. But on the 13th of May, which is just a few days ago, you tweeted out information from the Gaza Health Ministry, which I guess is an earlier version of the sheet you just showed me. Just some stats there which really speak out and can cut. I mean, nothing really tells the story, but these are quite indicative of what's going on. 1,095,000 patients infected with infectious diseases due to displacement. 350,000 people in need of chronic patients at risk due to lack of medication. 33 hospitals out of 36 are remaining in service. All 36 have been damaged, but only 3 are still actually able to function. There's a lot more. 55 health centers out of service. Besides hospitals, 160 healthcare facilities partially targeted by the occupation. You mentioned that there's this infrastructure of hundreds of doctors still supporting through video calls and everything else. How is anything still functioning with this scale of devastation?
Well, I think the right person to answer that is whoever doctor on the Palestinian side you can get in touch with, or the Minister of Health himself, Dr. Yusuf Sabrish. And I'll provide you the contact details because he's a very good person to interview. I really dislike this position of being, in a way, a source or a channel or a spokesperson for the Palestinian healthcare, because they don't need that. They can talk for themselves. But to be a little bit practical about your question, I think the answer is that it is not capable of functioning. I think that's the sad truth. In the north of Gaza, north of this transaction that the Israelis have made, there is virtually no healthcare. There are a few clinics barely functioning. So because we don't have international journalists in Gaza, I understand that you're asking this question. And I would love to be able to answer it in a sort of first-hand way. But I haven't talked to everyone and in every hospital. But those that I do talk to, they tell me about completely overwhelmed hospital buildings with not only patients, but also still massive amounts of refugees, because people in Gaza consider the only safe places the hospitals, because the Israelis are bombing everywhere. I mean, in Rafah, they bomb tents. They bomb the UN schools that are used for shelter. They bomb apartment buildings. They bomb cars. So there is no safe space. But we have this, we all have this impression that the last ditch in a civilian society is the hospital. You know, it's this castle of humanity, this palace of compassion and care, where you go with your mommy when she has a stroke, where you go with your kid when he or she has a diarrhea. And it's 7/24, always open. And there is good people there who will take care of you and meet you with a smile and with professionalism. So it's easy to understand that in many ways the hospitals and also the primary healthcare stations are the anchors, sort of the where you have the the poles of the tent anchored in order to have a safety network for people in a society. So in Gaza, they flock to the hospitals, they congest them, they are never ever chased away, and many of them have family members who are hospitalized. So how they manage to function, it is a question of understanding the level of morality in the Palestinian healthcare workers, number one. Number two, they're enormously acquired experience in improvisation, because they have been attacked and they have been besieged for so long that they can turn a needle into a surgical instrument. They can make a plaster of Paris from whatever they get. They can improvise an operation room, a splinter, a traction for a fracture. So we have a saying in Norwegian that naked woman quickly learns to weave. And of course, for the Palestinian healthcare worker, as I know them, because I've been there so many times during attacks and limited resources, they are extremely clever at improvising and not giving up. They never give up. They never give up. So I think the most important answer to your important question is that it is in the character of the Palestinian healthcare system to adapt to the developing disaster by finding new solutions all the time. But there is one thing that is never on the table as a solution, and that is to give up. They move around, they evacuate the patient, move them to another hospital, find some solutions. But in that picture, of course, there is a massive avoidable death rate. We use the expression avoidable death in medicine when you have a medical condition that could, with proper medical care, be saved. Take, for example, a myocardial infarction, where we have method now, where we can dissolve the blood clot with thrombolysis, and we can open the narrowed or the blocked artery in the heart with a wire, with a balloon on, so we can bring back the blood flow to the heart muscle. We can avoid the myocardial infarction, and actually the patient with that kind of myocardial infarction can go through that disease process without even getting a myocardial infarction, and have the artery fortified through this stenting process, as we call it. But that requires a hospital system, an ambulance system, a calling system for the patients to call the emergency that is operative. And in Gaza, they are denied this for political reasons. And it is against international law, of course. But don't forget that Gaza has been under siege now for soon 17 years. And that siege has also attacked the functioning of the healthcare system. Supplies, maintenance, replacement of old equipment, updating of equipment, and in my field, emergency medicine and anesthesiology, I've seen how long the Israelis can hold medical equipment on the checkpoints in Khmer Shalom, or previously in Karni, or in Erez, just with absolutely no reason. So if you have a system in place, which most of the Western countries will have, you barely see myocardial infarctions because we can treat it early. Stroke is the same. A brain stroke, you can get the clot out very quickly. Trauma, we can handle a lot of trauma with new devices and new understanding and new evidence-based knowledge. Cancer, bear in mind that the 10,000 cancer patients in Gaza, they do not have access to radiation therapy. Why? Because the Israelis never allowed it to be installed in Gaza. There are three elements in treatment of cancer today. It's the surgical treatment to remove the lump or the tumor. It is the oncology, the intravenous cytostatic treatment, chemotherapy, and it is radiation. With these three treatment modalities, we can heal and recover lots of patients with cancer. In Gaza, no radiation therapy. You have to go to Augusta Victoria in Al-Quds, in Jerusalem. And to go there, you need a permission from the Israelis. And they deny up to 40% of the exit permit applications, either because the company, the person, the family member going with the patient is not accepted, or for reasons they just don't tell. And there is a significantly higher level of mortality among the cancer patients who are not allowed to go to Augusta Victoria. Well known, published in the scientific literature. Very nice studies from WHO. So all this is known. And what is the solution? It's of course to get the radiation therapy to Gaza and to have full-scale cancer treatment. And in Gaza, there is a very high level of certain types of cancer, probably because of the pollution from all the bombing from the Israeli bombs with type of, heavy depleted uranium and heavy metals. So this is another example of how sadistic the strangulation and the de-development of the healthcare system of the Palestinians in Gaza is. And don't forget that the attacks on hospitals also take place in the West Bank, and there has been attacks in Tulkarem and in Jenin and other places on hospitals, civilian hospitals. So this is the brand. This is the brand of the Israeli occupation army. It is to attack the most vulnerable, the most unprotected, and most needed civil services in a society, which is the healthcare, the ambulance system, the emergency calling system. That is the safety network for the people. So we don't know the excess mortality. We have to study that. But I believe, and I'm pretty sure, it is tens of thousands of people who have died from diarrhea, as you mentioned, which can easily be treated, from jaundice, that can be treated, hepatitis, lice, and so on. And all these excess diseases that you mentioned, like gastrointestinal infections, of course, is a result of lack of water and hygiene. Normally you should not have more than 20 people per toilet in a disaster situation. In Gaza, it's 810 in southern Gaza. Imagine 800 people sharing one toilet and then no running water. Of course they get disease. Of course they get, fecal oral contamination, and they get very serious diarrhea disease, which for the most vulnerable, the children, the lactating women, the already deceased, and the elders, can kill them. Diarrhea can kill you. And, there are quotes from high-ranking Israeli officials saying, let the epidemic diseases, let the infections kill them. That will save our soldiers. It's so horrible that it is hard to wrap your brain around that this has not been stopped by the Western governments.
You've already started answering to a large extent the next question I have, but what I want to get into, it's less medicine, but more on sort of the Israeli narrative around the healthcare sector. Now, we've all heard, and it's never been proven, or there's been very flimsy proof that the hospitals are used by Hamas as militant bunkers. But you've also mentioned that the attack on hospitals is systematic, and you've seen it since 1982, and you've seen it beyond Gaza in the West Bank, and I'm guessing you've even seen it in refugee camps in Lebanon. Can you talk me through how this narrative of trying to show that hospitals are places where terrorists or Hamas fighters are hiding sort of suits Israel's plans, and through your experiences drawing from the last 40 years, not just what's happening now in Gaza, which you're hearing about, how you've seen this take place, and you mentioned systematic. Try to go into details of how you see it systematically unfolding in the last 7 months, but also in the last 40 years.
In one way, I'm pretty sick and tired of the question about shifa and the question about hospitals as military command centers, because there has not been one single proof There is no forensic evidence at all to these allegations. And the media, in particular, I mean the Western media, they have taken this bite from the Israeli hashbara, the propaganda machinery. They have been repeatedly accusing Shifa of being a military command center. We heard this first time in 2006 and 2008-9, Operation Cast Lead. We were actually called by the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, who had got a message from the Israeli government that they had to get us out. You know, this was Operation Cast Lead, a pretty heavy attack. And why? Yes, because they were going to bomb Shifa. And why should they bomb Shifa? Because it was a military command center. And it was, a few hectic hours. And they even had arranged with an armed convoy that should take us out, because they wanted to get rid of us because we were reporting. And in 2009, they did not allow any Western journalists in like they do now. So we were pretty important voices just to report on the ground what happened. We did not see anything of the sort in 2006 or 8-9. We have never seen any command center structures in Shifa, nor have I seen fighters or military armed people, except for the police standing guard outside for crowd control, which is needed in a hospital in wartime. So I've never seen any sign at all. And I've been allowed to walk freely. I take pictures everywhere. I open all the doors I want to open. I talk to anybody, and nobody looks through my pictures. I've written 2 books about Gaza, and all the pictures are my own. And I have never seen any command center in Shifa. But the point is that there has been 600 attacks on healthcare in Gaza from October 7th until January 7th. And these attacks were not validated by the Israelis through saying, oh, we attacked this primary healthcare center because it is a military command center, or we attacked the Turkish hospital, the Gaza Cancer Center, because it is a military center. They attacked and destroyed parts of the cancer center with absolutely no argument of that being a command center. The same with the Rantisi Pediatric Cancer Hospital in Gaza City, the eye hospital, the psychiatric hospital, that cluster of hospital buildings. And then they produced some sort of quite naive, childish kind of, oh, look here, we have a Kalashnikov, without giving any independent proof from independent investigators or journalists that this Kalashnikov was not placed there by the Israelis. So, and during the most heated debate on Shifa, the Palestinian authorities in Gaza said, we invite any investigation committee from the international community to come. We have nothing to hide. They can come, they can examine all our hospitals, and we will open all doors. Who stopped that? Israel. Because they knew it was not true. And if anything, through these years, I've learned that Israelis are chronic liars. They lie about everything which suits their cause. Look at the attack on UNRWA. The claim that UNRWA employees were taking part in the 7th of October breakout. The committee from the UN didn't find any evidence. Israel did not provide any evidence. They shot that out in the same week as South Africa took Israel to the ICJ to divert the attention. It seems like they have a whole catalog of attention diverting claims, lies, propaganda, rumor machines, in order to all the time keep this screen of fog over what is really going on in Gaza. So my conclusion is, I've never seen any command center in Shifa. The tunnel that they produced pictures of was built by the Israelis in the 90s, I think. I was in Shifa when Israel were occupying Gaza, and Shifa was an Israeli-controlled hospital. That's actually the only time I've seen an armed person, and that was an Israeli pediatrician, a doctor who had a leading position in Shifa, and he had a handgun in his belt. And I said, are you going to have that gun during the meeting? We were a WHO delegation. And he said, of course. And I said, but you're not allowed to have a gun in a civilian hospital. That's against the Geneva Convention. You have to leave it outside. He said, who are you to instruct me? I carried the gun. I said, and I said, okay, keep the gun. I will not participate in the meeting. So all these rumors, all these claims that hospitals are used as military command center, I haven't seen any independent forensic proof of that. And I don't think that proof exists because Palestinians are not stupid. Palestinians, they know the Geneva Convention. And for those who follow, for example, electronic intifada, you have seen footage where the Palestinian fighters have in the crosshair have Israeli ambulance helicopters, military ambulance helicopter, evacuated wounded Israeli soldiers. They never shoot at them. I've never seen any proof that Palestinian fighters are shooting at any hospital function on the Israeli side. Has anybody heard about any attack on Israeli hospitals or primary healthcare clinics? No. Palestinians don't do that. 600 attacks until the 7th of January. And after that, it's been going on and going on and going on. Has anybody seen any doctor, nurse, or paramedic killed in Israel? Any Jewish or Israeli doctor, paramedic, nurse killed? No, we haven't. What's the latest number in Gaza? There is at least 130 ambulances destroyed and 493 healthcare workers are killed by the Israeli occupation forces in Gaza. Soon 500. What would the world have said if somebody killed 500 American doctors and nurses? Or if they destroyed 120 Ukrainian ambulances? I mean, the double standards are so sickening. It brings me to rage to see how the West, how EU, how US, how the Scandinavian governments are backpadding Israel and at the same time hailing the armed resistance by the Ukrainian people against the Russian occupation, which basically is the same historical situation. A country occupies another country and the people resist, which they are entitled to with arms. I don't support Hamas. I don't support Jihad or PFLP or Fatah or PA. I support the Palestinian people and their clear right to oppose occupation with arms, just as I support the Ukrainian people and their right to resist the occupation with arms, just as I supported the Vietnamese people to resist the US occupation with arms and tunnels, as they did successfully. So I am very clear about this. I don't accept any attacks on civilians. Anybody who fights an armed struggle has to follow the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, of course. And anybody who violates the protection of civilians should be investigated and sentenced. The problem is not the Palestinians. The problem is the massive impunity of the Israeli occupation army. And that impunity has lasted since Sabra and Shatila and Bierut 1982, and you can just go on and go on and go on. And now is a historical turning point because for the first time they are taken to court. And that is a game changer. And that is an earthquake for Israel, of course, and for the United States and all the backpadders. That combined with the students' intifada, I think, will make a change.
Dr. Mads, I just want to again take you back to 2008. In 2008, you sent a message out when you were one of the few doctors foreign doctors in Gaza was actually able to sort of act as a journalist because foreign media weren't allowed in. And the reason why I'm going to read to you what your text message is just to kind of contextualize the scale of the violence and destruction now as opposed to then. This is what you write. This was following a grenade strike on a Gaza City vegetable market on the 3rd of January 2009. From Dr. Mads Gilbert in Gaza. Thanks for your support. They bombed the central vegetable market in Gaza City 2 hours ago. 80 injured, 20 killed, all came here to shifa. Hardest. We wade in death, blood and amputees, many children, pregnant women. I have never experienced anything this horrible. Now we hear tanks. Tell it, pass it on, shout it, anything. Do something, do more. We're living in the history books now, all of us. That was in 2008.
Mm.
You had already seen a lot by then. In this message, you say you haven't seen anything this horrible.
Mm.
This is now almost just a little speck, or one of many events that were happening probably in the first 180 days of this conflict. Were probably every day in the first 180 days of what we've just seen was probably multiple events like this. Just your comments on that.
I vividly remember when I wrote that SMS and sent it out, and it was during one of the very heated days in January 2009, and they bombed the vegetable market, and I thought I couldn't take anymore. So I was at the brink of, in a way, giving up, and I just wrote it straight down and sent it out as I shout, I cry for help, and we continued to work. And of course, it was, of course, painful enough for those who were killed and injured in the vegetable market. But we could multiply that 30,000 times with what is going on in Gaza now. We could multiply that 100,000 times if you combine what is going on now with what happened in 2012, 2014, 2021, and so on. So I don't know what's going on, but what we see in Gaza now, and in 2009 they also attacked hospitals, but they never burned and bombed the hospitals. They didn't kill that. I think they killed 14 healthcare workers, not 495. So what we're seeing now, I am out of words. I don't know how to describe this, and I know many people have it this way. I have a hard time getting up in the morning, many mornings, because I know my WhatsApp is filled with 30, 40, 60 messages from Gaza and from other sources describing and portraying and in detail informing me about new, unimaginable attacks in Gaza. And I think that we are getting numbed by all the facts we get, and bear in mind there is a condition which is described by psychologists, which is called compassion fatigue, and compassion fatigue essentially means that your compassion as professionals, can be exhausted if you don't get refill, if you don't have a way of venting out what you're taking in. It's also called debrief, but mainly it is about sustain a long-standing crisis with lots of impressions that tax our emotional capacity, our feelings, at a high level. We want to cry, we want to vent our anger, we want to help, we want to go there. We don't want this to happen. We want to comfort the children. We want to be close humans. And then we're sitting here in UK or in Norway, and we can't get there because Israel, the occupiers and the bombers and the killers and those who are destroying the healthcare system are also commanding defense around Gaza and also saying that, no, you cannot get in and you cannot get in. We only take people that we have vetted, and we only take some very few. So we can't even get there the way we would go if it was an earthquake or like Ukraine, hundreds and thousands of volunteers are going there to support educational system and medical system and everything. So all our love, all our solidarity with the Palestinian people is hindered, because what we want to do is that we want to go there and be human shields to protect the children and the women and the civilians and everyone in Gaza with our lives. Because this is about life. This is about all of us. This is about the life of all of us. And our children, our grandchildren, they are, in some way, they have to understand why we didn't do more. Because these numbers are incomprehensible. And the attacks and the evilness and the starvation of 2.2 million people as the world is watching soccer games, it is incomprehensible. So at the time, at the level of compassion and solidarity work, we get so exhausted that the enemy can say, yeah, it's quieting down. So we must not come to that point. We must stay together. We must support each other. And we must brace for impact and for a long haul. Because this is not over today or tomorrow or this summer. It will last for a long, long time. And when there is a ceasefire, because there will be a ceasefire, then our obligation is to support the rebuilding of Gaza with the Palestinians in leadership. I am very clear that I will spend, if needed, the rest of my life in taking part in rebuilding Palestinian healthcare in Gaza under Palestinian leadership, not as a NGO and making the Palestinians a beggar community like Afghanistan, but under the proud leadership of the Palestinian people, who has managed so well through so much oppression and so much colonization. But we need to be careful so that we don't come to the brink of our own capacity and we lose the energy and we just close our ears and eyes because we can't take anymore. So good people, take a rest, take a break away for a day or two, go to the woods, go to the mountain, go to the beach, stay with friends, recharge your empathy, recharge your capacity. And we must not forget that the enemy wants us to feel helpless, to feel like particles in a cosmos where they have full control. But the majority of the people on this earth are in support of the Palestinian people. The majority of us support the people of Gaza. We just need to be together, to get together and to organize. And we need to direct our solidarity work to our governments so that they are pressurized to use the same tools against Israel as they have been using against Russia when it comes to Ukraine. This will be the landmark occupation. It's not a difficult conflict. I don't use the word conflict about Gaza. It is a difficult occupation. And this occupation has to be solved with a combination of armed resistance and political solutions. And those political solutions will come in place once the governments feel pressured enough from the people and the solidarity movement that they will change their politics on Israel and on Palestine. And the only language they understand is if people are voting for them or not. So I think the next step in the solidarity movement will be to challenge all the parliamentarians, all those going to the EU Parliament, to the national parliaments. What is your stand on Palestine on these three questions, for example? Open embargo, divestment, ceasefire. You can formulate the questions and say, we will ask all the candidates for the next election and we will publish the results. That will make them think. They don't care about demonstrations. They don't care about people walking in the streets. They can barely hear it into the parliaments, into the halls of power. What they understand is if they lose their seats. And what Israel understands is money and power. And as long as the US is supporting Israel, they're not going to shy away from any of these mean, sadistic methods they're using in Gaza. So we have a great responsibility on us, but we need to ration, we need to take care of ourselves and our family and our friends and other solidarity workers and listen to each other and give each other a good hug. The most important thing in crisis for a human being is another human being. And we can all be that other human being for each other. And through that, make strong alliances. Why would I as a doctor be preoccupied with this? Because I'm sick and tired of wiping up the blood from the floors of the hospitals in Palestine, mending the wounds, while the Israelis' causative factor, the bombing and the occupation, is going on unhindered. Because as a doctor, I'm obliged to do two things. I have to take side with the patient, and in Palestine, the patient is the Palestinian people. So I choose to be on the side of the Palestinian people, and I support their resistance. And number two, I'm as a doctor and a healthcare person, I'm trying to look for the root causes, not for the symptom. Now, the blood dripping from the operation table from a 8-year-old child with double amputated legs is a symptom of something else. It's a symptom of colonialism. Of course, we're going to take care of these legs, but we can't only do that. We need to address the root cause, which is the occupation of Palestine, which is not a difficult conflict. It's a difficult occupation. This is not a symmetrical conflict between two parties. This is not between Hamas and Israel. This is between the Palestinian people and the colonial rule and the colonial occupation army of Israel and the United States. That's why this is not a difficult conflict, but a difficult occupation. Titrate your language, because the word we use are important. The terrorist is the state of Israel. They fulfill all the criteria to be called terrorists, using armed means to terrorize a civilian population. They've been doing that for years and years, tenth of years. Israel is attacking, Palestine is defending. Israel is colonizing, Palestine is resisting. And these words are important. This is not a difficult conflict. This is a difficult occupation. And the occupation has to end. This will not be solved by more field hospitals and more doctors. This will right now be solved by ceasefire, opening the borders or defense, unlimited access for all international aid agencies and help, and stop the excess mortality and the avoidable death in Gaza. Take care of the children and stop defunding UNRWA. This is my simple prescription for Gaza. And then we need long-term political solutions to end the occupation.
Dr. Mads Gilbert, I have one last question, and I actually I'm in doubt whether I should ask it, because it takes a negative turn again after the optimism of how bad the situation is. But it comes again to naivety. And you just said that one day there will be a ceasefire, and then there will be an obligation to rebuild Gaza. Do you still think that maybe you're being naive, that there may not be a ceasefire, that the worst will happen? And if that happens, what do you think the consequences are for the world?
Number one, I resist turning cynical. I don't want to be a cynical person. I want to be a realistic optimist. And if we look back at history, the colonizers have lost by and large. There are multiple problems with that, and there is still colonization, there is still colonial thinking and all that. But if you look at South America and Africa and Asia, by and large, the great picture is that through the last 250 years, people struggled, and the development of humanity has diminished the amount of colonial power. This struggle in Gaza and in Palestine and the West Bank is immensely important, because if Israel and the United States is going to kill the number of people that they seem willing to kill in Gaza, it will, of course, be a disaster. But I am sure that the Israeli army, with the support from US, cannot kill 5 million people, which is the number of people, Palestinian people living in the West Bank, in Al-Quds, and in Gaza. There are 5 million people. And then in addition, the diaspora. So Palestine, the Palestinian people, will not go away. They may do as they did with PLO and Fatah, evacuate them from Beirut, and then try to fool them with the peace treaty and the Oslo Treaty, which was a sham and a shame. But Palestine will not go away, and the Palestinian struggle will not go away. What do you think those roughly 1.5 million young people in Gaza, who have experienced through their life nothing but siege, bombing, occupation, dehumanizing treatment, lost their parents, lost their homes, lost their schools, lost their university? Do you think these kids are going to sit idle and say, yeah, well, we lost, so we better just accept this new reality that Israel has taken away our country? They will not. It will continue in new forms and take the river of resistance will find new paths. and it will be to the surprise of the occupiers. I fear that this pier they have been building, the Israeli and US military forces, that this pier that they claim is a pier for shipping in humanitarian aid, which could be shipped in on the hour by just opening Rafah and Khmer Shalom. So that's just another lie. I fear that this pier is built in order to make it possible to force the resistance out of Gaza through some sort of the same type of deal as in Beirut in 1982, for those who remember that. I'm not sure, because I don't talk to high-ranked people in the resistance, neither in Hamas nor in Jihad, but I'm not sure if they are willing to do that. So I think the Israelis are pretty desperate. Netanyahu is pretty desperate now, because we all know that his future is at stake. He will not be re-elected. He has a trial waiting for him. He's a crook, he's a criminal, and he's a sadist. So he's an unwanted person, and there will be arrest orders on many of these complicit Israeli leaders and high-ranking officers and others. So I think regardless of what happens sort of militarily in Gaza, there will be a long and painful legal battle, which was started by South Africa. And more nations are joining in on the cause to support the South African cause, and the latest Egypt surprisingly supporting South Africa. So I think that the situation in the Middle East is changing, because the Arab masses, the Arab people, good Arab people, they don't want to leave their Palestinian brothers and sisters in this necropolitics, in this dispensing situation between life and death, as they are forced into in Gaza and in the West Bank. And their leaders fear the people always, so they will try to make maybe some symbolic moves, I don't know. But I think the ceasefire will come soon, and I hope and really beg that the people of Gaza, the children, the women, the wounded, the terrified, the hungry, the thirsty people can be allowed a repose, a rest, compassion and support, because they deserve it like any other in the world. Nobody deserves more than Gaza now to have a ceasefire and to have compassion, love and solidarity flowing into Gaza, because that's what we're all waiting to provide. Because I just came from a demonstration here in Oslo today, a massive choir singing in one of our museums, the National Museum, all new sorts of expression of this attention to the Palestinian cause, this new wave of solidarity with new forms of solidarity. And we're learning every day. And we're learning that we can't trust our politicians. We're learning that our European politicians are keeping shut about what we should not keep shut about. They are actually betraying the nevermore slogan from Holocaust. Never again slogan from Holocaust. They are betraying that slogan by their tight lips and their support to Israel. Even if they're trying to maneuver now and say, oh, you can't do that, oh, you can't do that, oh, we will blah, blah, blah. That's only, I think, to save them from being sentenced in the ICJ as complicit states and complicit politicians. So to conclude the answer to your question, I don't know, but I know the only thing I can do, and that every one of us can do, is to step up our concrete solidarity work, not just hit a like on the Facebook, or not just, do some imaginary things on the social media, but get out of your chair, get out of your your habitat and go to the streets and organize strikes, pressure for boycott, pressure for divestment, pressure for ceasefire. We need to keep going, and it's been fantastic what has been going on all over, and it's not over. We're maybe halfway. So we need to encourage each other. We need to encourage each other and to be strong and learn from the Palestinians. And I say, as I used to say, Kuluna Gaza, we are all Gaza. Gaza Hatta Nasser, Gaza will have victory. Palestine Hatta Nasser, Palestine will have victory. And solidarity and love are the two most important qualities and words in a compassionate life and in a compassionate society. And these two things will be the changing force, I think, when it comes to the brutality of the occupation of Palestine.
Dr. Mads Gilbert, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your sumud.
Thank you. Shukran Iktir.